either. By the end of this, you will know how to do this thing, which is an interactable main menu, where you can, well, interact with, and exit out of it so you can play the character again. And then, if you press play, you'll just start in a new level. This can be your main level then. Right. So, very simple. Let's get to it. Right. We need a couple of things. We need 3 blueprints, or you just need 2 if you don't want a background video on the object. You need 1 blueprint for interaction and 1 blueprint, like this one tells, this is a HUD blueprint that tells you that you can now interact, and this is the blueprint where you have your buttons in there and you press the buttons and then they do something. Nice. That's the first thing you need. And then you need an interface. This interface has 4 functions: can interact, cannot interact, start the interaction, and end the interaction. Can interact sends the interactable object to the player character. Cannot interact tells the player character that he is outside of the interaction zone and he cannot interact anymore. And start interaction is when you press a button as the player, you tell the interactable object that you are now interacting with it, and you send the player character and the player controller a reference of those 2 to the interactable object. And then you have end interaction. That's just when you exit it, so the camera turns back to the player character and, well, you've seen what it did. Right. You also need to add the interface to both the interactable object and the player character. So to do this, you just go into class settings of your blueprint, press on interface, press on add, and just write in the name. For example, main menu or main menu interaction. That's how I call them. And you do this for player character and also the interactable object. Then you need a blueprint for the object. That can be anything you like, honestly. I'll just quickly show you how to do the widgets. Everything else is self-explanatory, I think, but the widgets are a bit complicated. So, you just put in any object, could be a cube, honestly, it doesn't even matter. You can put a cube, you can put whatever you want. And then you just go into widget. You choose the widget class you want to use. And for me that's main menu. Then the important thing is, right now you see it's facing weirdly and the scaling is all off, you can't read anything. That's because you need to adjust the draw size to the actual canvas size. So how do you get the canvas size? You just go back to the widget, and here in canvas panel you just need to set the right scaling. So you can do, this is the right scaling, this is the right scaling, 16:9 scaling, and it's fine. And right, that's just, by the way, I don't think I need to explain how to do the widget. You always put a canvas panel, and then you just put in whatever you want, how you like to style it. Right. So now we got this here, and now if you were to scale this, put this on the box, you could not interact with it, and that's because of one reason. We are missing receive hardware input. Now we can use the mouse button to actually press on the buttons when we enable mouse cursor. So that's how this works. You need the draw size, the correct one. You need to take the correct widget class, and you also need to enable hardware input. That's all you have to do there. Now let's go back to the actual PC, because I'll just explain how to do this, or what else we need. we need a camera right here. So just put a camera there, place it how you like it. Like you can see a preview here, just place it so you're okay with it. Then we need this, that's like a collision box. And the collision box has two events. It has the begin overlap, so when you walk into the collision box, and end overlap. And then you just use the interface functions can interact and cannot interact to tell the player character he's now in the hitbox, he can now interact with the object, and you'll send yourself over there, so a reference to the object. And if he walks out of there, you just tell him cannot interact. Right. Let's see how this works in the player character. Okay, so let's say we receive the call or the message that we can interact with the object. Then we store the interactable object, the reference to it, as a variable, so we can later interact with it again. Then we create an interface widget that just tells us, so we just create one of these that just has a text in there, you can now interact, and we add it, and we also store it as a variable so we can delete it later. We add it to the viewport, and then we also set through a boolean variable that we now can interact with something. That's just to make sure you can't press F or whatever button you use to interact later all the time. Can cause some errors, maybe, just to make sure. Right. Now we have cannot interact. So this is when we walk outside of the object. Right here, we walk in, we can see that we can now interact. We walk out of there, we cannot interact with it anymore. So what this does is whenever we walk outside of the hitbox, we get a message that we cannot interact, and then it starts this event. What we do is we remove the widget from the screen, so we remove the F to interact. We empty the reference to that widget, so it gets deleted automatically. We also empty the reference to the interactable object, and we set a boolean that we can interact to false. Right. Now let's see what happens if we do want to interact. So we stay in front of the computer and we press F. And now we zoom in there, we can play, we can exit, we can watch the videos, whatever we want. Right. So, first of all we check if we can actually interact. We can, in this case, and then we send a message to the interactable object. So all the logic here is in the interactable object. Then we just remove the widget that you can interact, so this isn't in the way. We clear the reference, we clear our boolean, same right here, and we wait 1 second for the camera to zoom in, and then we set the visibility of the player character to 0. So he's not in the way, and we can actually see the screen. Now, let's see what actually happens when we interact. We need to store the player character and the player controller that we send over. So here we send the player controller and our self, so the player character, to the interactable object. Then we need a reference of the widget. So this widget right here, we need a reference to it, and we need to cast to it to then store the same variables for the player character and the player controller. Before we can cast to the widget, we need to first create the variables, and they need to be public. So you need to make sure that this I is in public, and you just tell it which variable type. You take one for player controller, you just say object reference, and you have one for player character. You just take your player character, blueprint and once again say object reference, and that's all you need to do for the variables. And then you can cast to the widget blueprint and set the variables from the interactable object. Then we just switch the camera. It's like this. It's called set target view with blend. You take the player controller. Where is it? You can do it like this. You take the player controller. So that's the object that you want to change the camera from. And then you just give it a reference to this object because there's the camera in this object, and it automatically switches. And if you give it a blend time of 1 second, it'll have a nice smooth motion to switch the camera. Then what you need to do to actually interact with the widget, you need to put the input mode to UI only. The delay is not that important, it's just so the mouse cursor only shows after 1 second. Then you need to also show the mouse cursor. For both of those, you also need the player controller again. So for the mouse cursor and the input mode. So now let's see what the buttons do, because there's a bit of logic there as well. So first of all, let's say we play. The first things we do is set the game mode back to game only and remove the mouse cursor so they are not visible in the next level. And then you just open level by name. This just opens the different level you want to play. So just like this, we now have our mouse cursor here. And if we press play, we can just continue playing without having to do anything else. That's nice. And then for the stop, for the exit, we tell the player controller to go back to the camera of the player character. Once again, we wait 1 second, and we also tell the player character that he can now start the event and interaction. We also set the input game mode to game mode only and remove the mouse cursor again. And then in the player character, if we have end interaction, we just set the visibility, we just turn the visibility back on. So now we can move again and we are visible again. So if we go like here and we go outside the character, we can see that he's invisible. We go back in there, press exit, and he's visible again. And that's basically all. Then you also have like the videos, which are just media player files in a widget. So what you need for this is basically you need a media file source. I think it needs to be MP4, but I'm not really sure. This is just ignore the file path names here. This is just any media file you have. You just drag and drop it from your files in here. Then you create a new media player. You need to remember one thing. You need to create a new media player, and you need to check this here. Output media texture asset. Then you always get a media texture. You need this later. Just put the video in here, save, enable looping, and then you can go back here to the widget blueprint. It's right here. You drag and drop the media texture onto the canvas panel. So you also need to create a canvas panel, of course. And then you need a bit of code where you create a reference to the media player right here. Go to the default value and choose the correct media player. And then you need to tell it which source to open, so which video to play. And that's just the file. So that's how you do an interactable main menu. And you can add a lot of customization here. You can add nicer buttons, more videos, different videos. background videos. You can have a video here that then switches to the buttons if you actually interact with the object. Yeah, you can, if you press play, you can play a montage instead of just switching to the level. There's a lot of customization, but this is like a base to start from. Good luck and have fun with your interactable main menu.